everyone. We are listening to the Rachael Maves Podcast, and I'm Rachael Maves, your host. Today, we are speaking with Jacob Griscom. Jacob is the CEO of R&B Communications, where he leads the development of AI-driven software and digital infrastructure for charter schools and the education organizations. His work focuses on helping schools reduce complexity, replace fragmented tools, and build customized platforms that improve efficiency and outcomes. Jacob is also developing Compart, a network-based system designed to better connect people with learning, work, and opportunity. He frequently speaks with educators and technologists about the future of AI, personalized learning, and the systems needed to unlock human potential. Jacob, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much, Rachael Maves. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your background and your story. Usually in the podcast, we have a lot of educators or people who have been in the field of education in the weeds of like teaching and administration. And that's not quite your story and background. So tell us a little bit about your career path and then how it segmented into the education field.
When I was in high school, I was a competitive runner, long distance runner, and I got a disease in my foot called Freiberg's infraction. It's usually reserved for like teenage ballerinas, but I got it. And so it kind of closed a door on at least being as competitive with the running, but it opened a door to say yes to the American Field Service and go live in Argentina as foreign exchange. So I was there, through my years being 16, 17, came back home to my small town and was kind of like, all right, what else can you show me? And I picked up a couple of books at that time, The Secret Life of Plants and Autobiography of a Yogi. And those got me interested in both the inner world of human capacity and experience, as well as the inner world of plants and everything. Like what was the consciousness that was underlying these plants? Because these studies were so fascinating to me on plant consciousness and what they were able to perceive and how they were able to experience our thoughts and respond to our intentions. And that both of those lit me up in different ways, and they pushed me towards a starter career in Ayurveda, which means the science of life. It was a holistic health discipline over in the West and the medical profession over in India. And so I did actually end up living in India as well, and then came back home. And so my teaching was to adults that were learning Ayurveda, and I was just early 20s. I came back home from India pregnant. Well, like Sarah was pregnant, but we, So Ethan's 23 now, and my other son's 20. And so that was my first experience teaching, was to adults. But what was different, of course, in that environment is that adults had raised their hand. They had opted into that experience. They were even paying money to do it. They wanted to be there. And so, that's different than compulsory K-12 education. So that was kind of my early career. I ended up, building a practice in that space. And then I went on to do various things in sales and marketing, finding that my understanding of human behavior was also useful in those domains, and how people make decisions and how they change behavior or don't. Understanding that people have to have a certain level of dissatisfaction for them to actually really change anything in their lives.
Yeah.
And that dissatisfaction can come from either wanting something that they have not been able to realize yet, and like finally feeling like, okay, what am I missing? Or losing something that was very important to them and having to re-examine their priorities or their strategies that led to that loss. But dissatisfaction as an element for actual real human change. So throughout that, I built a lot of things. I built businesses. I sold businesses. I built things in the nonprofit space as well, coordinating public and private efforts. I ended up selling a business called Everyday Ayurveda to a firm out of New Delhi, India. And after consulting with them for a bit, it was like 2017, and I got really into blockchain and crypto and the implications of what it could mean to be able to remove unnecessary middlemen across. And my mind just went all over the place thinking about possibilities with that. But yeah, worked in crypto and built that out. Then got into other aspects of technology and business development. And yeah, that led me to connecting with the R&B communications team. I took the CEO role after there was a sort of a leadership void, and then an owner role with the team. And education has become a focus for this company, especially charter school education in California, because I do feel that those are the two big levers that move civilization: policy and education. And education is kind of upstream of policy because it's influencing how do people think. It's the collective interior. And a lot of times things kind of descend from subtle to gross. And so things move from the interior to the exterior. What we think and what we focus on and what we don't think about and like that tends to kind of print out in the real world. So yeah, you asked about my career path. That's something about that.
I love what you said about the two levers, policy and education. When I worked at the California Department of Education, part of what drew me into that position was the policy piece and how much bad policy and good policy has such an impact on our students and what that means and looks like. And I kind of had this belief that if we can have people in these positions that are thinking really deeply about policy and the downstream effect and what that means and looks like when it's in the implementation stage as you're creating it, that we could have better outcomes for kids. Sometimes it's true and sometimes not, but that resonates. So tell me a little bit about this company, R&B Communications, the work that you're doing around AI-driven software. I mean, that's a huge hot button topic right now in the K-12 sector.
Yeah, I don't think people quite realize how, I think people suspect and are maybe starting to feel the implications, but haven't really fully come to understand how big a change we're going through here. And what we've been doing for a long time is building software across industries, but within K-12 charters, we've just been solving all of the business problems. A school will turn to us when the existing solution that they want isn't out there, right? Or maybe they have a platform that does it, but doesn't do it the way that they want. Or the cost of the platform is set up in such a way that it's not really priced for their size or their needs, or it's offering too much, too little, not the right way, that kind of thing, right? So in those are all things that would cause somebody to look towards custom. Now, what would dissuade someone from custom is the time to delivery, because building a custom application in the past, first took going through the fairly detailed specifications and wireframe process. And then a clear scope on the build. And then the build may take 3 months, whatever it is, depending on the complexity of it. And the upfront cost may be somewhere in the $20,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 range, depending on what it is, which you may still be able to justify because you're like, well, the ROI is still there over the next 2 years and the customization we're going to get and so on. But what's changed? Now that same software that takes $100,000 in 6 months to build takes hundreds of dollars, a few $1,000s. And it takes a day to build, at least to have like an MVP around. So what does that mean? That means directionally, there's a big shift to go from product to like operating system.
Right.
So instead of buying product pieces here and there, we've had to pivot our entire business model, and we think we're directionally correct in where this is headed, and that schools are going to realize this, and that platforms that have gobbled up a lot of market share and have like kind of sat back on their haunches and haven't had to like rapidly improve or rapidly respond, because like in B2C, business to consumer, you have very high cost sensitivity, but very low purchase friction. People can just impulse buy. In B2B, you have to think in terms of what is the ROI? What's the return on investment? We're going to spend X and we're going to get back Y over what time frame and what level of certainty.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It makes sense or it doesn't. But then with B2G, you have like very high friction to get in, but very low cost sensitivity. Why? Because it's OPM, as Milton Friedman's put it. It's other people's money. And so when you're spending other people's money, it's not because people are inherently, corrupt or whatever. It's just that the incentive structure is aligned in such a way that when you're spending, like, it's the exact opposite. If you're spending your money on you care about both cost and quality. If you're spending other people's money on other people, then you start to care a lot less about both cost and quality.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So there, as we see, like there's these incumbents in the space. They're like, so we're like the piranha, and we come in and now it's clear to us that there are things like, oh, we won't ever touch SIS and like that. And now we're like, we can build an SIS in a few days. So of course we're going to get to do it. So now everything is, think of it now, instead of all of these piecemeal things that have to be cobbled together and aren't cobbled together well and don't share data well together. Now you have one operating system, like platform hosting layer.
Yes.
And then you have categories of applications that you need.
That's
but the
right.
application itself we're not building it now over here and then reselling it over here. No, we're just rebuilding it over here exactly the way they need it now.
Yeah.
So the IP in a way is really just shifting to our security stack around it, the modularity around it, the spec sheet around it. But this is the thing, like this is for schools and everybody to start thinking in terms of, in like probably Hollywood, probably gaming, like every domain, it's like there is no moat there in the same way. It's because now you can just, what's the way to say it? AI is middle to middle. Artificial intelligence is middle to middle. Humans are end to end. So it still requires us to point and direct the rocket ship. And the more articulate you are, and the more developed your ideas are, and the more clear you are directionally, the better you're going to be able to steer that rocket ship.
That's right.
And then on the back end, the more you're going to be able to refine it, iterate on it, curate it, have taste, that kind of stuff. So those are the human domains as we see it right now today. It's the end-to-end environment. AI is middle to middle, and that changes assumptions about everything. If you haven't rethought absolutely everything about your business, about your school, about the future, then that is both understandable and there are things to think about.
Have you read that book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow? By Daniel Kahneman? You would probably really like it, but the premise of it is really challenging the way that our brains work and what we process really fast and what we process that requires us to slow down and actually think about it and be engaged. And the challenge in his book is the things that we think we take the time to actually think about, we don't. It happens very fast and all the assumptions that come out of that. But when I was reading that book, it was like, you feel like you're going a little bit down the rabbit hole, like in Alice in Wonderland, where all of a sudden you're challenging and thinking, what do I really think? And is that really what I think about this? And it just pulls apart all of the foundational assumptions that you've put into place around your own worldview and belief systems and all those things. But I feel like AI is doing a little bit of the same thing, just in a different setting around. We can't keep reorienting to the things that we've held before as cornerstones. And this is, if we aren't thinking about an opening up to the ways that this begins to explode, then we'll either be left behind or doing a disservice, at least in the education sector, I truly believe.
That's right. Yeah. Back to the premise that behavior is only changing if somebody has enough of a felt sense of dissatisfaction. And that may come from interior triggers, or it may become because the world is forcing it from the outside. And the world could mean a partner or a family member or friends, or it could mean a macro change of conditions, which we have at various levels right now. We have, I do this presentation called Arc and Fork, where I talk about this major global shift from a material to electrical consciousness. And then major, like Dalio's empire cycles, the end of American empire and the rise of the reascent of Chinese empire, and that shifting polarity of the world. And what does that mean? And then Strauss and Howe's generational cycles that were in the crisis, the winter of this 80 to 100 year crisis cycle, where we consistently tear down whatever institutions were running during this generation in preparation for what we rebuild in the spring.
Yeah. So thinking about the work that you're doing, everything that you're seeing from a global perspective in this layer of AI, what keeps you up at night about education in its current state?
That the future of education is not schools.
Tell me more about that.
In the same way that like the FDA can measure, we've presented X number of like drug or surgery injuries or deaths. But what's not being measured is the number of deaths that are being caused by the FDA preventing things from coming to market. That in the same way, public education will measure graduation rates, standards, achievements, and so on, but is not measuring the damage we're doing to human beings and society by putting people in school in the first place. So my revisioning of like, well, what is because learning is clearly something that is like natural, innate to a human being. We come out being totally learning sponges. The senses are open. We're taking everything in, right? And so in the same way that you're pointing to like this idea of a reexamination of concepts, our current, system of education was like fork. We can roughly trace it back to, the Greeks were there. They gave us Socratic discussion, exploration of ideas. Then the Romans gave us some concepts of like merit and rising based on ability and so on. And the British started to segment society by roles. And then the American education system brought in the idea of universality, equality, like everybody's getting an education. But it also came about during an industrial period where the purpose of that education was really to just set people up so that they could be cogs in the machine. So I think we're due now for the next fork. And I think the fork is a bit of like the old thing becomes the new thing. And so because learning is a natural, innate human capacity, I have like an operating assumption that by making it compulsory, that does more damage than good.
Interesting.
That it means that our first experience of it, even if we're the personality type that does okay with it, and like we're extroverted, or we find our group and we have like this thing called like a good time or an okay time at school, we're still being sorted based on age and geography. It's still not something we would have like come up with on our own and been like, I want to put myself in this
building for 6.5 hours a day.
and so to whatever degree there then develops some level of aversion or distortion around the idea of learning, that it's either not fun, torture, uh, work.
Um,
It's something other than like the joy and delight and magic of being like a learning machine. So when I'm living over in outside of Singapore in our special economic zone of Forest City, and we're doing startup societies or startup countries, and I've got kids in that environment, and I'm watching an 8 and 10-year-old sister like win a hackathon. It's not because they were exceptional, like genius out of the box. It's simply that the conditions that they've come up in have allowed them to remain like learning machines. They haven't had that distortion added. And so they're able to engage with people older than them, younger than them quite easily. So you set up an environment where when you have basically what I would call society as a service, or what I'm penning as kind of network unions, which is the vision I have for what's a really natural operating mode that solves all of the problems instead of just consistently trimming the branches and not addressing the trunks and the roots. Then a 12-year-old can teach a 30-year-old, and the natural organization is not around age and geography, but it's around interest and aptitude. And so people are constantly making offers. Here's what I'm interested and want to pass along. Here's what I need to learn and I'm interested in doing. The places where there's the most interest and alignment become recurrent clubs, groups, courses, whatever. But people are constantly opting into it based on, again, interest and aptitude rather than compulsion, age, and geography. So that's a pretty interesting idea. And if you think of it as society as a service, it's like the new SaaS, right? Software, but society as a service. So it covers your housing level. It covers your food level. It covers your health and fitness level. It covers like the aligned community. And it covers learning, but within a system that is much more organic and natural to the human being, the human operating system. And it builds equity, and not in the buzzword of like equity sense, but like actual wealth accumulation by contributing to the community over time. We have like a software that it forms like a digital nervous system for the community, and also allows like a local living economy to happen off of dollar rails, off of crypto, just within sort of a local, very hyper local currency system. So to me, that's much more interesting because it's then addressing all of the fragmentation of life instead of just a Band-Aid treatment around this or that issue within the system. And so now you've solved now the housing issue, you've solved the health issue, you've solved the education issue, you've solved the wealth building issue, and you've brought all of the cost down, like the hard cost as well as the soft cost of fragmented life. And you've leveled up across all of these areas. So that directionally, I don't know if that keeps me up so much because I sleep really well. But it does give me like a North Star to point towards, and an interesting position to be in, where I have to kind of Trojan horse in this big idea within all of the Band-Aid treatments I'm helping charters with, which is, let me help you with the reality of your today.
Yes.
While also saying, hey, we need to be building this other better thing parallel for the future so that we have like an exit into, because there is no certainty around what happens at end of empire, and especially in the state with $18 billion in deficit and.
That was going to be my follow-up question for you, Jacob, because I hear what you're saying about this North Star, and that feels like immediately like overwhelming. How do you even get there? What are those first next steps? And as you're working with charter schools, assuming that this is the premise of moving forward, what are one or two like really tangible next steps that move them into that space of education being something that isn't constrained in the same way that it is today?
It's a really difficult ask. So it could only happen if people are like able to see the time and place that we're in like as it is, not as they would hope it to be. And if they can acknowledge like, okay, changes, rapid change, dramatic change is afoot, even if it's not my preference. And so what does it look like to become, instead of like, just give me one thing that I can hold on to, like, if there's not really as solid a ground to stand on, if the energy of this time is much more of like a surfer riding a wave and then saying, okay, this one's about petered out, let's paddle back and catch whatever next one is forming. That's a very different place to be in. And, admins and so on are already typically energetically, psychologically underwater in terms of just fielding incoming.
That's right.
So I don't know if this is the right approach, but it's the best I can make sense of today, is take all of the C work off of their plates, like leverage, just make what they have to do within the system just so much more efficient, cost effective, integrated, etc. Pull as much busy work and BS off of people's plates as possible so they can be doing more of their A work, their high value kind of person to person connectivity, human level work. Either way, that creates value today. And it's like a business model that makes sense for today and directionally where we're headed. But then to the 1%, 3%, the 5%, that someone can begin to be thinking about and building the parallel reality, I think it descends from the cloud to the land. So you build it with, that's why Part is such interesting software to me. It's a brand new category of software that I've built. And it's about creating like a digital nervous system for a network, which is a group of people, by indexing the individuals in it in an integral way. In other words, we want to know, okay, what is Rachel's like subjective reality of her interior individual space? What is her objective reality, her skills, abilities, basic health, and so on? But also, what is her intersubjective, her cultural affinities and realities? She speaks English, she's an American, but what tribal sort of affinities does she have, and what subgroups is she a part of, and so on? And then her exterior collective, which is like the systems that she's a part of. What roles does she consistently play, whether it's in family or in organizations or in society or community, and so on. So now we have like an interesting integral lens on this person. And now the goal within that network becomes the vector. So now if Rachel wants to accomplish something within health, wealth, relationships, career, hobbies, awareness, whatever it is, she can now point that goal by articulating that goal out into the network. And the software is now going to find alignment with anybody else in that network that's very highly aligned with helping to achieve or support or explore that goal across whatever number of those quadrants are really relevant for it. Sometimes all you need is a skill. Okay, great. But sometimes you need a skill plus a shared worldview. Or sometimes you need a skill plus an opposing worldview so you can see blind spots.
That's right.
So that becomes really interesting to be able to do that, and then also have like an economy within that network of what we call asks and tasks. What would you, if you're trying to coordinate human behavior, what are you asking people in your network to do that they can then be compensated, incentivized to do without having to pay them all in dollars and run 1099s and all of the complexity of the state, just have like a platform level credit within the network. So that's really interesting, because if schools then could even take that project on, they would get immense value today in terms of being able to see and like online resources that are not currently used within people, within their parent networks, within whatever, and incentivize actions that they want to see that don't involve having to give people like pay raises. It can just be more of a circulating economy of activity as well as sort of voice. That's the other side, the other credit on this platform. And that is what I would call kind of building that capacity in the cloud. Because now when it comes down to, okay, let's actually become capable of this. Now we're a network that's capable of some level of collective action.
Mm-hmm.
The next step in a startup society is then the crowdfunding of territory. So then you have to actually buy or convert some sort of land, some sort of real estate into, okay, where are people actually going to be living and who should be living together? That really is going to be determined best by cultural affinities. Like, there is no United States of America anymore, as far as I'm concerned. There's more of a disunited tribes of North America. And so when you get one country, two nations, where like Red America and Blue America don't marry each other anymore. They rarely hire each other. They exist in totally separate media domains. It's like, one generation of that ideology creates biology, and you've got like a Sunni Shiite situation. And these are not people that can like live together anymore. And so, especially if the one thing holding them together, like a common currency, begins to become more shaky at the end of empire and so on. So at that point, then it becomes really relevant. And the school could be one of the many interesting places to pilot that, is to say, well, what cultural affinities do we have within our collective, and what would it look like to start to, like in technology, we have this idea of you create value when you bundle, unbundle, and rebundle. So like you have like songs, and we bundled them into CDs, and then we unbundled them into MP3s, and then we rebundled them into Spotify playlists.
Yeah.
So right now we're in the phase kind of collectively in the West of the unbundling. So there has to be an answer to how do we rebundle, especially if the shouting and the shooting gets worse. How do we rebundle in a way that's intentional, coordinated, and with people that are going to be able to find some alignment and build something along the lines of these network unions where they can take care of, like the Maslow and Howe says in these fourth turnings. We know that the things that we've had in the past, those are, some of them have and some of them are crumbling, but that there will be something that comes after it. And so, if you're in tech, if you're a builder, the interest becomes, well, what's the positive thing we're building for? What is the rebundling that makes sense for our time and place? So that's kind of how I see it. You have to build it in the cloud first, then it can descend to the land.
Yeah. What you're saying, I think, puts some vocabulary maybe to something that is felt, I think, in education right now. The more conversations I have, a lot of people are feeling like we're just kind of waiting to see how this emerges, because something will emerge from it. There will be a massive shift, but I don't know if anyone has quite yet, outside of you with the way that you're seeing the North Star, there's not that collective North Star yet. And I think that people are feeling that right now.
And it would be hard to do that from the inside, because what you're describing is we're going to cannibalize our current system in some form. So hopefully with like the lowest amount of trauma possible would be great. But sometimes, again, people have to hit. It's like in health, it's like, okay, you've been doing this unhealthy thing. You've gotten away. Oh, but there came the heart attack. Now you're like, let me reconsider. So yeah, it would be difficult because, again, that OPM, that other people's money, it is a heroin of a type, and sort of, voluntarily moving off of it feels very difficult. And yet, so how does that happen? So typically, if you're like an investor, you'll do this thing called hedge, or you diversify, and you'll start to build out some uncorrelated assets. And so I think that's the general concept here. We need to build out some uncorrelated assets to public K-12 education that are in line with I think the deepest spirit of the charter movement, which was, hey, we need to do this better. we need to serve humans better. We need to serve kids better. That relates to then how humanity and civilization unfolds. Then people that went into charters had at least some level of that in their DNA because they wanted to try new things and experiment new things, but they, they're constrained still within so much accountability that the very nature of just keeping the thing alive means they can't be purely focused on human outcomes. They have to be first focused on institutional survival and then human outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, that is very true. And we've just exacerbated that problem, I think, in the layerings that we've put on for education and what the expectations are and what even public education is for that it never was when it was first created. But Jacob, we are so far over time. This was a very unexpected, wonderful conversation that I'm going to have to go through and spend some time thinking. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, people that haven't plugged in yet, they can come to the AI and EdTech Mastermind. We do open office hours every Thursday currently afternoon. So people can plug in and have whatever conversation they want, whatever they're exploring. Very practical, very philosophical, wherever you want and need to go. Accommodate that. And and then whatever conversations people want to have around solving and improving the systems that are not working for them the way that they want today. And then the bigger picture around how can they start to build and diversify for tomorrow.
I love it. Well, thank you for your time today, Jacob. I appreciate it.
Thank you too, Rachel.
This spring, Parsec knows you're working hard to budget for the next school year. Check out our resources page on our website to help with your compliance documents and strategic plan alignment at www.parseceducation.com/resources. We are here to support you and hope these resources take time of the stress out of the heavy lift.